And we are live.
All right, all right.
I know we went live a little bit early, but always better early than late. And just making sure that everything works. Let's check on the website. Website is live. Beautiful.
Socials are live, which is great.
Instagram is now live. All right.
Beautiful.
All right. Now, just the fun part of waiting for people to come in.
Should we talk about the weather? Like the weather's very dynamic and volatile at this moment.
It definitely has been. Yeah. New York's been getting hammered.
Certainly, the East Coast has been piled on.
How fun! Are you? You're in Boston right now?
I'm actually in the Baja Peninsula, so I'm down south in Mexico right now.
Okay. Yeah. So not experiencing much of the inclement weather that way.
And no, what do they say? I'm empathizing, but I'm not sympathizing.
It's a good place to be.
Yeah, and drama free from the geopolitical side as well, which is good at the moment.
I hope it lasts.
You and me both, and the entire Cabo San Lucas community.
How long are you going to be there?
Just through Saturday. Yeah.
Okay. So we're interrupting your vacation for this?
I'm interrupting my vacation for this.
Okay. All right. I feel better about that, honestly.
Yeah. It's a choice.
Yeah. Let's see. Matt, do you prefer this?
This is good.
Okay.
I mean, either's good. I'm not picky.
Okay.
We are bigger here.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Does run a particular risk.
No,
maybe I'll
do you
zoom myself out a little bit.
Oh, that's an option?
It is for me because of how I have it set up.
I gotcha.
I have the video going through OBS. So my head is already like twice the size as yours. I don't need to emphasize that any more than it is.
Well, that's actually I have a large head. Thank you very much. I usually
and yet.
Steve will always win. I think we just have to. Is there a way to see the like who's in, who's commenting, all that stuff? Is it just on people?
Yeah, so I don't know what's on your page, but on the right-hand side of the app, there are comments and then there are people.
Okay, cool.
So you should be able to see those as they come through.
Yeah, cool. Private chats, group chats.
Yep.
Chat with the studio. Cool. Love it.
I'll just wait for folks to roll in. So Saturday, back to New York? Back to Boston.
Back to Boston. And then a couple weeks in Boston, then out to Boulder for an exciting summit. And
that's right. I'm looking forward to that.
And then Vision Expo East. And maybe a couple of other places along the way. We're more mobile this year. We were less mobile last year, but we're in the field, which I think is good. It's important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting. I just got back from Eyeball in Palm Springs, and it had some peaks and valleys, like weather-wise. The day we got there, it was windy and rainy, and then the next day it was like kind of nice, not super warm, but not like what I think of as like desert California. And then the following day, like it just got progressively warmer and nicer. But what a great vibe the whole time.
How was it well attended?
Yeah, Yeah, there was a bunch of super cool like frame vendors and really great education. Kayla from Spexy put all the education together. I did a lecture.
Nice.
Dr. Brianna Rue did a lecture or several lectures. There's a lot to recommend it.
Oh, I love it. I heard last year was pretty memorable.
Yeah, very much so. Hey, everybody, as you're dialing in, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your punctuality. Feel free to drop your location in the comments. Would love to know where you're calling in from. And we'll get started in just a couple minutes. Get started. Oh, embarrassing. I have caps lock on.
You've got one of those loud keyboards. It's very nice.
Yeah. As clickety clack as I can make it. It feels more productive, even if I'm not actually more productive. My wife hates it.
There's some cult level keyboard fans out there that it's got to be just right, the right click.
I do like a mechanical keyboard. Honestly, it just feels better. If I had like the opportunity to hit that typewriter register thing, I think I would enjoy it for a little bit.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
I saw an IBM typewriter that instead of having all the different like arms that pop out, it was a golf ball design. And so that
interesting.
All the symbols were basically like raised elements on a golf ball size iron ball, and it just would rotate and pop in, pop out. It was cool.
Fascinating. Oh, I think I've seen one of those. Interesting. Right. Well, the time has clicked over. We'll wait for folks to dial in, but as we're going, I want to thank everybody for coming in. The name of this event is Clinical Innovation and Practice Economics, and since that's what we're discussing, I have with me Matt Rosner, who is the co-founder and, well, you know what, Matt, I'll let you speak for yourself. Tell us a little bit about your title, a little bit about NeuroVisual Medicine, and how you ended up in eye care.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steve. I'm excited to chat about clinical innovation and practice economics tonight. My name is Matt. I am CEO and co-founder of NeuroVisual Medicine, which is a global patient care company that's focused on bringing binocular vision dysfunction care to a global audience. We are predominantly represented here in the United States, Canada, and Australia, but we've recently expanded to Sweden and Singapore, and are continuing to sort of find like-minded optometrists that are looking to extend what they're able to do and able to treat a lot more with their clinical care. So happy to talk about NeuroVisual Medicine and BVD either now or in a little bit, but we are care first and patient centric. So I think that definitely that's a big part of what we put out into the market.
Yeah. So a couple of questions. How did you get into, did you say Singapore and Sweden?
In Sweden, yeah. So
how did that happen?
We have our intentional expansion strategy, which is mostly across North America, and we're beginning to dip our toe in Europe. And we've always had a philosophy that if there are clinicians who are eager to treat BVD in their region using a standardized microprism technique that doesn't require any heavy or technical equipment, but just the standard pieces of equipment, we welcome them in with open arms. And so over the last couple of years, we've had clinicians reach out from South Africa, Zambia, Mumbai. We just had someone reach out from West Bengal. And it doesn't always work for them to travel to our home base and train with us, but every once in a while it does. And so we were thrilled to bring in the last 2 months a really amazing clinician from Hogsby, Sweden, and another clinician from Singapore to extend NeuroVisual Medicine and our network of care even more globally. So
That's
that was it.
amazing. Yeah. How did NeuroVisual Medicine begin? Where did the organization come from?
Yeah. So the NeuroVisual Medicine, the patient care company, is a relatively new entity to help educate patients and really get the idea of BVD into the patient psyche, really make BVD as known and familiar as the acronym ALS or ADHD or conditions like dyslexia or Asperger's that have all sort of risen in visibility over the last couple of decades. So that's NeuroVisual Medicine, which is our patient care company. But NeuroVisual Medicine as a philosophy started actually with my family. Both my parents are researchers and clinicians, and they founded the NeuroVisual Medicine Institute back in 2013. And their whole philosophy and work was around how do we help patients who are uncomfortable with symptoms like dizziness, headaches, anxiety, nausea, motion sickness. There's 18 different symptoms that have sort of populated this syndrome, if you will. And they figured out over years and years of trial and error how to treat patients who have subtle visual misalignments, a binocular vision dysfunction with a fractional unit of prism. So we now have a training program that is built on their research, and the research is ongoing. We're writing a new paper right now on dizziness and disability, but it's really the opportunity and the idea that optometrists can be more for patients and can offer way more with the right support, training, resources, and protocols. And so that was 2013. They founded it, and then I joined about 6 years ago to help grow our footprint and expand our mission globally. So we're doing it, and we're having a blast.
Well, that's amazing. And I think that's such a perfect segue into the topic of the conversation. So you mentioned providing support and resources and education. What are the most important things in your mind about delivering innovation to a practice? Because I know that the people that we speak with every day are constantly putting out fires, and hard to innovate when you're always trying to solve the problems that you already have. What are the barriers to successful innovation, and then what are the opportunities?
Yeah, well, innovation is one thing, but implementation is the other half of the coin. And there are so many amazing technologies that haven't even made it into clinic or even into the mainstream because they haven't yet been packaged for private practice. And so I think a big part of innovating is once you've created whatever your differentiating innovation is, whether it's a new way to bill or a new way to tackle the complex infrastructure of insurances, or how to treat a widely experienced but under identified condition. Anyway, long story short, once you get your sort of technology, your innovation, then it's a question of, okay, who do we serve? Right? In our world, we serve two people. We serve patients and we serve clinicians who provide this care. And so we have two audiences that we have to think about and really design around. And for the clinical side, it's we think from an innovation standpoint and an implementation standpoint, there are a lot of different people who need to touch a service or a specialty within a practice. And so we think we go through the patient journey. They call the office. We have a call center or a front desk. Then they get their insurance verified. We have some sort of biller or back office person. Then we have when they come in, the front desk greets them. Then they're screened by a technician. And so we go through the patient journey step by step and identify all the little moments that a patient's going to experience in your clinic. And then we reverse engineer the processes, the resources, the training, everything that's going to make it easier to deliver that innovative care to a patient.
So the innovation is obviously a step that's bringing something new to market, shall we say. Then the implementation is the how, and then what are the whys? Why bring in something new, and then why bring something in new for like practice satisfaction, patient satisfaction, and service, and then there's certainly a financial component to it.
Yeah. I when I work with larger practices, um, and like larger clinical establishments, they've figured out how to work at scale. And so in doing so, they figured out the economics that are successful for all of the people within that practice. But I'll give you a recent why that goes straight to economics that I think is really, it happened recently, and it got me. And I've been thinking about it ever since. There's two clinicians I met in the last month, both independent practice owners, both providing care to patients, wonderful care, very heart-centered doctors. One has yet to, over the last year, didn't make a profit. And the other was paying themselves probably 50% below sort of average market rate for an optometrist. And we work a lot with independent practices and independent practice owners, and it took me by surprise and really has got me thinking, because we have these associates doing well and making a very consistent average, whether it's Walmart or one of the big chains or at these larger private practices. But it seems like the smaller independent practices are sort of, I wouldn't say suffering, but they're silently plagued with these complicated economics that are getting all the other employees paid except for themselves. And so I think, that specialty care is one of the main angles that can help private practices do that. That's the economics. But I think maybe the biggest reason folks are seeking something other than what one optometrist friend of mine calls spinning and grinning, which is sort of the grind of primary eye care, is because it can feel like a grind. And we hear that from a lot of folks, that they, over years and years of doing 15 to 20 patients a day and not having the time to build a relationship with patients, it wears on them emotionally and energetically. So a big one of the reasons why we love innovation is because it gives folks something novel, something new, something to break up the day, and something that can really offer a different level of satisfaction when they're treating patients.
When I was at Eyeball delivering some CE, forget how the conversation began, but I found myself talking about a quote from The West Wing that I've had in my head for 1,000 years. And the question that you have to answer, when running for office is why you, why now? Or the questions you have to answer are why you, why now? And I think practices, by and large, the independent practices that we get to work with are heart-centric, as you put it, right? A lot of the ODs, a lot of the opticians that I work with are in this to make an impact on the practice. But by contrast, they don't necessarily do a great job of, in the marketplace, answering those two questions. Why them? Why now? Many practice websites and social media and all of that tend to look quite similar. We have great technology, we have great service, we'll treat you like family, but everyone says they have great technology. Everyone says they provide great service, and some people don't want to be treated like family. So what advice would you give to folks? Let's say that they've made a decision about a path to take for innovation. What are the best practices for communicating that information? How do they get out there? How do they help their community understand who they are and what they're doing?
My favorite lesson that I learned from a coach several years ago was that whether we're talking about practices or patients, any customer, and there was some research done in the mid-century around sort of what gets people to make decisions. So we're talking about how to get patients to make a decision. Why choose you? One of the things that they talk about is addressing somebody's pain is so important, and solving somebody's problem is so important, and messaging that to them. So I would ask any optometrist who's doing whether specialty care, primary care, what problem are you solving for your patient today? Right? Because when we talk about there's sort of the features and benefits marketing, we have great technology, we have cool services, we'll treat you like family, which are all sort of features and benefits of going there. But then there's this other scenario, this other way of speaking to people that it says, hey, are you dealing with headaches? Is your kid struggling in the classroom? We can help. And that really, I think, is a pattern interrupt, because when you talk directly to that person and you resonate with what they're struggling with, and they're staying up at night because their kid's getting C's in class, and now they're Googling or on Facebook groups trying to figure out what are other parents doing, a really good pair of glasses for a kid who's really never been to the optometrist in their younger years can be an immense game changer. So I think speaking to the questions that people are asking and the things that are keeping them up at night can be a huge opportunity to tap into your community and get them to feel like you understand who they are and what they need.
How large a component of the implementation of innovation that you mentioned earlier, how large a component of the implementation is in the communication to the market? Because I know there are like process things that are obviously key to this being successful, but aside from the actual process of bringing a new thing in, training your staff and becoming better clinically or learning a new clinical skill, how large a component is the communication, and how does that begin?
I love spending time on this, and I spend a lot of my week on communication. When I work with clinicians, and I attend a ton of CE as a non-OD to learn how others are sort of changing hearts and minds of optometrists. And one thing that came up recently is the idea, and this is both in optometry and in business, what we measure, we pay attention to. And when we talk about innovation or specialty care, the minute you measure something, now we've got data. And data, ideally, fingers crossed, but not always, is objective. And there can be a subjective spin on data, so we could spend an hour talking about that. But the idea being that if we're offering dry eye, the minute we do a speed score, now we can stand shoulder to shoulder with the patient looking at the speed score together, right? It's a non-oppositional posture, and say, hey, this doesn't look good. Does this sound like you? And they'll say, yeah, I struggle with these things. And then the question becomes, well, are you interested in doing something about it? Because if so, before we ask them if they're interested, does this sound like you? And if so, how much does this impact you? And connecting pain to impact is important. But then pivoting to, would you like to do something about it? Because we can help. And I think that is oftentimes the breakthrough for a lot of clinics, is just asking the question about the symptom underneath the innovative treatment can unearth lots and lots of conversation from the patient. And I think that's the easiest starting point for clinicians and practices.
I think that's tremendously insightful. You said in there non-oppositional, and what I heard in there, the kind of the subtext is by contrast to how a lot of things are presented in clinic. Now, am I mishearing? Or did I pick up on what you were putting down?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, if you think about the way that most of our exam lanes are built, the patient's sitting across from us, and usually we're sitting at the desk typing. We love oftentimes to be directly shoulder to shoulder across from patients because we get to view in our world of neurovisual medicine and BVD. We want to look at their visual posture, their physical posture. We take in all these clues. But when you're presenting a treatment plan, or sort of identifying a pain point, and whether this could be for your employees, frankly, hey, Jen, I want to look at these numbers together, right? What are you seeing? And let them talk first, because it's always important for whoever you're working with to lead the observation. And if they're missing the point, you can sort of come around and help push them in the right direction. But patients will take action, and so will staff, if the idea feels like it was theirs, if they own it. And so that non-oppositional posturing helps the patient make it their idea to move forward or to address a pain that they're solving.
So in practice, I've had experiences where practice will bring in a new thing. The example that comes immediately to mind is LipiFlow. Is this pretty expensive piece of equipment that does something that's pretty neat and is a differentiator for a lot of practices. So something like that necessitates kind of holistic understanding from the entire team. Well, let me back up. If you bring in something like LipiFlow and you don't have holistic understanding throughout the entire team, the odds of that being successful decreases exponentially, because precisely because of that oppositional framing, where if a patient comes in, they might have dry eye, they might not. They might want the LipiFlow treatment, they might not. But if the first time they hear about it is in the office, in the exam lane, talking to the doctor who says, hey, you've got this thing and treatment for it's going to cost you $800. When do you want to book it? That feels pretty oppositional, like in the context that you put it in. And I have to imagine it creates a ton of friction. So what I'm hearing you say instead is, rather than me being directive, me, the practitioner, being directive to you, the patient, it is us together finding common ground on the problem to address.
Completely. And I'm sure you've been told things that are not correct and that need fixing, with you or your health or your
My attitude,
face, your cosmetic routine. Name the Facebook ad that will tell you you're not doing the thing right, and that on the other side of that is the promised land. If they're telling you, hey, Steve, this is wrong with you, the minute that, like, immediately defense goes up. No, that's not wrong. I have great skincare routine. What do you mean? So then immediately it becomes an us versus them. But doubt and curiosity are super powerful mechanisms in building the other option, which is, hey, Steve, have you ever noticed that sometimes you get bumps, like, on your cheeks? Yeah. And do you ever get, like, hey, Matt, do you ever get, like, some redness when you drink? So, yeah, why? Do you ever get, and so if you can get these little yeses by being curious and by leveraging that that question model, because at some point I'm going to say, okay, fine, I've got these 5 things. What does this mean? And then now you've brought the sale directly to you. You've brought the conversation directly to you. And so I think with the most successful dry eye clinics, they use an inquiry-based model where they just ask the patients about their symptoms and how it's going and how it's impacting their day-to-day life. to the point where the patient says, okay, fine. Yeah. These are all hindering my life, and I can't watch TV comfortably, and I can't be in the sun because sensitivity, etc. I want to do something about it. Great. We got lots of options. Let's talk about the high one, the medium one, the low one, and something we can start with today. So yeah, when we tell someone something's wrong with them, immediately they get defensive. It's not their idea, it's your idea. And it's a recipe for losing the opportunity to help them.
Spent a lot of time over the last little bit thinking about friction, friction in process, friction in communication, and kind of both sides of it. I think when I say friction, a lot of people will typically think exclusively of the negatives, and there are a lot of negatives to excessive friction. But I don't think friction is exclusively negative. To be clear, I think there certain things require some friction to get moving. Like there are no friction on the ground, you wouldn't be able to walk. You would just slide and or fall everywhere. But I think that initial friction is good for you to be able to get your legs under you. So in the case where, you know, you're trying to eliminate as much friction as possible from the process to get to the answer that you would like, I think everything that we covered makes a ton of sense. From the making of a decision to communication to put it throughput throughout the practice to changing the sort of oppositional friction to a collaborative conversation. I think all of that is super valuable. I'd like to take a step back though. In your experience, and what have you learned? When is the right time for a practice to pull the trigger on doing something new?
This is such a good question. There is no right answer, but
Nailed
here's how. Yeah, so that's it. No right answer. Next question. You know, it's interesting. Let's go meta for a second.
Okay.
The question I ask the doctor or a practice owner is, how are things going? Are things going the way you intended? And there's sort of two conversations. There are conversations around how are things going, and let's get into the details and how do you feel about where they're headed. And the other is sort of an opportunistic lens. And there are some practices, maybe a quarter of optometric practices, that are, instead of things aren't going well or they're not going the way I expected, and here's what I want to do about it. But instead they say, we're planning for 2027. And in 2027, we're planning for an 8% growth. And to do that, we're planning to invest X amount of capital into expanding our practice offerings, or expanding our practice footprint, or doing a remodel, or a new website, or a new marketing strategy. There's sort of the problem-oriented conversation, the problem solution, and then there's this sort of opportunity and best fit tool conversation. So I guess it depends which bucket you're in. If you're in it's not going well, whether I'm burnt out, I'm losing staff, the economics don't look great, we're failing to fill our books. There's so many things that could potentially not go well, and we can talk about it. And so that's one bucket. And I think the question is, where are those pain points coming from? And so really it comes down to, a couple of simple conversations. Usually practice owners know they know they need to do something. Oftentimes, and I would say maybe chronically, optometrists don't do it fast enough. They wait.
Yeah.
And
Preach, Matt.
they de-risk. So they limit sort of the initial risk, but they end up losing out on early mover opportunities to be the first and to use that as a competitive advantage. So if I was to give you an answer, when's the right time to do it? It's however soon it is, sooner. Yesterday, not for everything, but yeah, I think that's definitely where I like to start the conversation with folks.
An adage that is unclearly attributed, sometimes to Sun Tzu, sometimes to just a general Chinese proverb, but the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is right now.
I love it.
Yeah.
100%.
But I think you make a really interesting point. I don't know what it is, and my perspective might be skewed because I've been in the industry for so long. But it does seem like there are fewer early adopters in eye care, or maybe an increased aversion to risk in eye care. Is that something that you see also?
I do, and until now, I don't think I put my finger on it, as clearly as you just did. Um, but in a lot of other industries, if you're stable and growing, there is a dedication to a percentage of your income going back into innovation. Large companies do this. They usually have a budget. Different teams sort of vie for different amounts of budget. That's where
Right.
Google Maps came from, and Gmail came from. A lot of these, different technologies came from internal innovation. But as independent practices, I think I would love to reset the headspace, to say that if you're a practice in 2026 as an independent practice, you should put some time and some capital in a little pot. Doesn't have to be a ton, to try things, because the top 5 to 10% of practices are doing just that, and they don't necessarily know like what experiment is going to be the one to be the breakaway success, or that's going to add the next 30% of net to their bottom line, or X relief to their patients. But if we don't take risk, if we don't try, and I'm not saying bet the farm, I'm just saying
Right.
bet one cow or two cows. Um, if we don't take any risk, then we're going to be stuck in this sort of slow backslide that most vision plans are pushing independent practices, and medical insurance are pushing practices back towards. Like, it's almost like there is a gravitational pull
Hmm.
backsliding. And
Yeah.
unless we innovate as independent practices, and plant our flag, or even push in the other direction, um, then we're slipping. And I think that's something that, it's hard, it's esoteric, it's hard to put a pin on, but it's something that keeps me up at night, and maybe I wish it kept other folks up at night in the same way.
Well, I think that's such an interesting point because I've experienced similar things, and in my presentations, and sometimes when I'm discussing this, I say, the exam reimbursements as an example, right? When I started in eye care in 2001, an IMED reimbursement for an eye exam was a grand total of $40. Smash cut to 2026, and IMED reimbursement for an eye exam is a grand total of $40 if you're lucky. And then, I was of the opinion that $40 wasn't enough in 2001. And, think of 25 years of inflation later, where the dollar is actually worth 47% of what it was in 2001. It is, it's not even $40 today. It's less than 20 today. Um, and in the context of vision plans sort of forcing a backslide, they decided what an eye exam was, not just in terms of reimbursement, but what it included 30 years ago. And that hasn't been updated even a little bit. So it does have this gravitational pull, and the industry keeps saying, go in network, you'll drive patients, and yeah, right, to an extent that's true. But at the same time, it cannot help but stifle innovation, not just because of the limits it puts on your ability to practice, but also because your book becomes so full that burnout becomes so real that the idea of innovation becomes terrifying.
Yeah, I the net impact of this backslide are the one independent optometrist that I mentioned earlier. She's working 4.5 days a week. She's doing 1 day of admin. She's seeing 10 to 13 patients a day. She's got a small staff. She is following the playbook of vision plans and lost money last year. She's an amazing clinician, and she is operating, not her fault, but she's operating on an outdated playbook. And because of this, it's sort of like her model's fixed in time and things kept moving. And now she's behind the times and is looking for a way to like get out, or at least sort of make up for lost ground. And so I think the net impact is huge. And we have optometrists overworking themselves just to break even now. And
Yeah.
and it's not a mistake. It's totally by design. But I think as independents, we need to reframe, what are we going to do about it? And what can we do about it? And there's a lot we can do about it. But it does involve betting 2 cows on risk, on something new every year or every other year or twice a year. It requires a little bit of side time to work on whatever that innovation is, or explore it or test it or demo it, just to see if it could be the thing that helps you or prevents you from backsliding any further.
So many of the practices that I talk to that are overwhelmed by, the vision plan patient, and I don't want to harp on this too much, but they do often have they're booked out several weeks in advance. If we're talking about mid-February, they don't have an appointment available until April. And by virtue of that alone, forgetting anything else about their practice, but if they're booked out until April, new patients aren't coming to their practice. If new patients aren't coming to your practice, you're not growing, period. If you don't have room for new patients, you cannot grow. End of conversation. And it's super difficult to step back from your practice and make a decision to make this kind of change. It takes quite a bit of courage. You're jumping into a lot of uncertainty, and then you don't know if that's going to be successful for you. But I think you're absolutely right that a decision has to be made. Some of the advice that I give to practices is, look at the big box retailers. Like, look at what LensCrafters and Costco and Pearl Vision and Warby, look at what they can do. And I don't mean to malign them, right? They're generalist offices. They have a lot of really cool frames. They have good lenses. They have pretty good staff, depending on the location, of course, but they have pretty good staff. But they offer kind of the middle of the road stuff. They don't do innovation. They do the generalist stuff. And if you do the generalist stuff and they do the generalist stuff, but they do it faster and less expensive, how are you going to compete with that? And also, they do it faster and less expensive, and they've got millions of dollars to market to your patients. You can't compete on general anymore. Like, it isn't 2001.
Yeah, and frankly, with the direction of technology, they won't be able to compete on general pretty soon. And
Yeah.
so I think, with technology and where AI is headed, which I'm excited about, and things will shift. And yeah, I think there's a need for us all to sort of pause and just assess the shift in landscape on a yearly basis and decide what we're going to do about it as practice owners. Because not doing anything is actually more risky. Not doing anything's a choice.
Right.
And you can make that choice, but doing it from an educated, sort of well-considered perch, rather than just sort of heads down grinding, we'll worry about it next year, there's this great, I'm sure everyone's heard it, but this fable or this motif of this man during a flood. It starts raining, and he's very religious, and so the flood keeps rising, and he gets to the roof, and boats start coming around and say, "Hey, come on." He says, "No, God will save me. Don't worry. I'm a religious, and then a kayaker comes by an hour later, and the water keeps rising, and then he's basically, there's nowhere to go, and this helicopter comes and and says, "Hey, this is it. Like, this is it. Join us. Come with us. Otherwise you're not going to survive." And he says, "It's okay. I'm a religious man. God will save me." And he goes to heaven, and of course he gets to have a session with God. And he says, "God, where were you? You let me die like this." And God says, "Well, I sent a boat, I sent a kayaker, and I sent a helicopter. You chose not to listen to any of them." and so I think, like, the landscape of optometry is not static.
Right.
Like, the water is rising, and maybe you won't drown physically. You won't, thankfully, God forbid, but you're going to be drowning in the ecosystem of a burdensome insurance plan paperwork, or trying to just make ends meet while still working 40 hours a week as both an administrator and an optometrist. We're drowning in work. And I think that's really, like, we've normalized it, which is the hard thing. We have to, I think the opportunity here is to say, it's not normal. It wasn't normal 30 years ago. It's been normalized, but it shouldn't be your day-to-day. Like, you should have evenings and you should have weekends as a practice owner.
Right.
And if you're not getting those, you are fully able to work a 4-day or a 3-day week. Practice I know is working 3 days a week and did about $800,000 last year. And a bunch of that was net. So, right. There are tons of other ways to do it. But if we're sort of saying, well, vision plans will save me or primary care will save me, we can't compete on primary care anymore as independents. And we need to do something about it and make a decision to try things and to experiment and explore.
I want to point out, when you said the practice working 3 days a week, or the practitioner working 3 days a week and generating $800K, you would hear that at a conference, and a lot of practices would look down on that. Well, I made $2 million last year. But the thing you said right after that is, well, most of that was net, and the $2 million practice cannot say the same thing. There's a lot of, like, I hesitate to put it this way, but there's a lot of ego wrapped up in that top line figure, and way less ego tied up in the bottom line figure, because the bottom line figure is a secret. Like, nobody knows that, but people come to a conference to talk about that top line, and it doesn't indicate what's actually happening. I think a lot of what you're talking about is vital to be understood. That the only constant is change. That's the only thing that everybody has to go through is change. Everybody and everything is change. I like to mention that, like, we've been talking for about 50 minutes, and over the course of this time, we have literally physically moved in space about 60,000 miles. Just in context, like, we are not in the same, literally not in the same place we were when this conversation began.
True, 100%.
And, like, you don't think about it because you don't feel it. You don't think about the change until you feel it. Like, you don't typically feel, you feel acceleration, you feel deceleration, you feel a stop and a start. But once you're coasting, you don't feel that. You only feel change.
Yeah.
So I think there's the other kind of component of this. Change will happen. Change is happening. Change is going to continue to happen. Your options are to let change happen to you, or let change happen for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, I think that being, I get passionate about this, but then I remind myself, don't get mad, get curious.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that's we try to teach our kids that when they're growing up and facing conflict. And so I think that, my message is, don't get mad, get curious, or at least get restless. Like allow the fact that, we could be talking to $2 million practice owners about improving their net, reducing their cost, or at least adding more profitable gross. That's one conversation we could be having. But I think the other conversation that has sort of become more obvious to me lately, or another conversation, not the other one, but is the fact that optometrists owning independent practices in droves are paying themselves less than the average associate is getting paid at a corporate chain. And I think we actually have a crisis within independent optometry around what independent optometrist practice owners are paying themselves. There is a, and I don't know what the metrics are. I'd love to do a study on this. But there are more optometrists across the US that would hear that $800,000 number and say, well, that sounds great, because I'm making 500K or 300K with 3 staff and I can't hack it. Like, and we're in year 4 of our cold start. So, I love to work with $2 million practices and do all the time. We also sort of fetishize the $1 million practice or the multi-million-dollar practice, but I bet 1/3, probably at least 1/3 of all practices that are independent in the US are making much less than $1 million, probably less than $500,000 a year. And those, I guess those are the optometrists maybe I'm talking to tonight, are the ones that are making under $500,000 a year and trying to figure out that how do you get past that mark, and working harder at this sort of outdated game won't necessarily get you there. And so, yeah, I think that change is constant. It is the only constant, and knowing that there is an alternate option out there, or many alternate options.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Sorry to interrupt, but I think that's like a hugely important point, is that there are so many other options. Like I've been comparing, today to 25 years ago to 30 years ago because of the financial differences in the low reimbursement. But also 25 years ago, a doctor and optometrist couldn't do half of what they can do today in terms of specialization. BVD wasn't a thing. Dry eye wasn't really a thing. Glaucoma treatment wasn't really a thing. Even a boutique optical was much less accessible than it is today. Myopia management, sports vision therapy, aesthetics. There are dozens of specialties that you can build, and every optometrist that I've spoken to has a passion for at least one of those. But the passion hasn't seemed to generate enough interest in making a material change in how they operate.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things that, let's talk about, we've been talking about the problem for a while. Let's talk about the solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, each of those specialties that you just listed off has a demographic metric behind it. 1 out of X number of kids are at higher risk of myopia. 1 out of X number of adults over the age of 50 experience the symptoms of meibomian gland dysfunction. 1 out of 5 people in the general population experience the symptoms of binocular vision dysfunction, or BVD. And so one of the things to note is there are other options, and each of those options has a cohort, at least in America, of Americans who are suffering with those symptoms today, right now, after work, watching TV or whatever they're doing. So the idea that, yes, there are other options in the world of specialty care. Let's say that's true, and it is. There is also this massive demand, untapped demand of people who are experiencing symptoms, but don't know that you can help. They have no idea that you can help.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really vital point. So let's walk that through in the last little bit of our session here. So binocular vision dysfunction is your expertise. It's what NVMI does. You're saying 20% of the American population has some component of BVD.
You got it. And there are BVD is an umbrella term for all the cluster of binocular vision issues. So we could be talking about a vertical misalignment, a horizontal deviation, superior oblique palsy, all sorts of different binocular dysfunctions. And there's currently about 18 symptoms that are tied back to BVD. And patients most easily identify with those symptoms. So headaches, dizziness, anxiety, trouble reading, motion sensitivity, lightheadedness, light sensitivity, and the list goes on. And we're talking pain symptoms, vestibular symptoms, psychological symptoms, anxiety, depression can be overlapped. At least 50% of kids who have ADHD and dyslexia are linked to a binocular vision issue. So it's everywhere. And from there, we can easily identify, could this be the thing? Is this the thing causing the patient's symptoms? And we have a very simple screening test that we do. It's we can post it online afterwards, where it takes about 4 minutes to screen a patient. Do they have the symptoms at a high enough level that they would be considered a candidate for care? Scientifically validated, peer-reviewed symptom questionnaire. And if a patient's a good candidate, we're able to give them, on average, 80% symptom relief over just 2 exams wearing a pair of microprism lenses. This is a pretty different way than we would have historically treated binocular vision issues, historically through vision therapy. This is a totally different alternate option to that mode of treatment to help this 1 in 5 symptomatic patients.
How does a practice go from not treating or being able to diagnose binocular vision dysfunction to bringing it into their practice? What are the logical steps to take?
Yeah, so there are a lot of, maybe not a lot, there is a healthy number of ODs across the country that are somewhat comfortable with Prism. And Prism is one of our main tools with treating BVD. And they might, let's say, they might dabble in Prism. They might prescribe a little Prism here or there. They might use, a Prism technology, with a screening tool. But patients are still looking and they're still seeking. And, if I have a condition that is not standard, like a common cold, I would say, is a standard condition. Binocular vision dysfunction is widespread, but I wouldn't say it's regularly recognized. And so because of that, if I'm a patient that has BVD, if I have 2 options, either to go to a specialist or someone who's dabbling, as the patient, I want to go to the specialist. Mm-hmm. So really what we do is we get to work with clinicians who are dabbling or maybe not very comfortable with prescribing Prism, identifying this condition. When we talk about Prism, how much, what direction, what level of fidelity, all those things. But from going from not treating BVD to being a specialist in our world takes about 10 weeks. And that's just the beginning. But our approach is to look at the entire team and the optometrist and raise them both up. The clinician with the clinical techniques and methodologies and protocols and tools and everything they need to be successful in treating these patients and bringing real relief in a short amount of time. And the team in supporting that clinician, everything from intake to screening to scribing to support that clinician. And in less than 10 weeks, we are able to get an optometrist from never prescribing Prism, hating Prism, to bringing dramatic relief to patients that have been suffering for a decade or longer. And from there, we follow each practice. So I know you have a high-touch process over at Anagram. We have a very high-touch white glove process over at NeuroVisual Medicine, where we are coaching them continuously from the clinical side. They have their own clinical coach to business coaching, because we know that there are so many little things that we want to get right. You can't do them all at once. 10 weeks is getting started. That's your launch. But over the next year, that's really where we dial in the specifics and the details. And we get practices to be incredibly successful, changing patients' lives and also changing their bottom lines.
So I think what you're doing is tremendous, and I appreciate the time you've given us this evening, Matt. If the people listening to us tonight or when we syndicate this want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with NeuroVisual Medicine Institute?
Yeah, you can go to our website, nvminstitute.org. You can email me, matt@nvminstitute.org, or you could call myself. I'm just kidding. Let's do email and website. Those are the easiest ones. We'd love to help you out and figure out where you're at. And, this isn't for everyone. And our goal is to figure out if this is a good fit, and we can reliably guarantee you'll be successful with the work that we do and the specialty that we offer, and get you onto a place of success.
Excellent. Matt, thank you again for your time. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I've been Steve Alexander, VP of Industry and Strategic Partnerships at Anagram. Matt?
Matt Rosner, CEO, NeuroVisual Medicine. Steve, thank you for hosting this conversation and having us.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Bye, everybody.